welcome to the Daily Geeky Pastimes podcast, episode 37 on the 24th of May, 2023. We're going to bring you all of the latest gaming news. There's not a huge amount of news, but there's a couple of kind of interesting things today. And we're also going to talk about some potentially, kind of hot topics. Some hot takes, if you will, because I know that's what everybody really wants from this. They just want to hear me say something that they vehemently disagree with. As a little PSA, there might not be a podcast tomorrow. There won't be any more streaming today. I'm going to have a little piece chopped off the end of my tongue later. And even though it's incredibly minor surgery, I'm absolutely cacking it, to be honest. I hate this sort of stuff. I'm super squeamish. So depending on how I feel, I might be able to do the podcast tomorrow. I might not. I don't know how well I'll be able to talk. So we'll see. Maybe my voice will change. Who knows? Maybe it will get even better for podcasts because I won't have an annoying bit on the end of my tongue. And then maybe I'll be able to pronounce TH properly and people will stop leaving those comments in my YouTube comments. Anyway, let's get on with the news. So there's quite a lot of little things today, really. And then a couple of slightly bigger ones. So the first one, this isn't massively important, but I think it's interesting. Activision Blizzard have been fined over their Diablo Immortal loot boxes. So basically when a publisher is releasing a new game, they need to talk to, I think it was Peggy who were the ones who, the European ratings board people, I think were the ones who, they had to say, hey, are you doing any of these things? And they sort of go down a big checklist and say yes, 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 no, 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 no. And Diablo Immortal, the mobile Diablo game that Activision Blizzard brought out, they said it didn't have any loot boxes in it because that's something that's illegal in Belgium. And there's various other countries have restrictions on it and it changes the rating for games. And they were like, no, 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 we don't have loot boxes. And then it turned out they actually kind of did have loot boxes. They did have some things that you could buy where you got like a random reward, which is basically what a loot box is, anything where you can buy them with real money, but you don't know what you're going to get. Like, it's a chance thing about whether you're going to get the thing that you really want or something worse. You don't know. I think the important thing is that you don't know the value of the thing that you're going to get. You could get something very valuable or you might get something not worth much. Lots of countries don't like that because some people are susceptible to that and kind of end up thinking, oh, well, I'll have a go at it because why not? I might spend £5 and get something worth £50. And then they spend £5 and get something worth like £1 and they're like, well, that's rubbish, but I might as well have another go. It's only £5. And then they get another bad thing. And they're like, well, I've already spent £10 on this. I might as well keep on going. And they keep on going. And then when they do win, they forget about all of the times they lost. And it's kind of a weird rule because I agree with it. I agree that this sort of thing is a bad business practice. I think it plays on a part of our brains that isn't very good at making decisions. And obviously for some people, they get much more addicted to it and they fall for it a lot more. But it's also something that's so pervasive in society, that's how lotteries work. You spend like £1 or $1 on a lottery ticket because you've got, the slight chance that you're like, hey, well, I might win millions or whatever. And then you don't, inevitably you don't. And then you keep on spending more money thinking, well, it's only £1, it's only $1, but the chance of reward is very great. And then you get like some people who get into the situation where they're like, oh, well, I play the same numbers every week. I can't miss a week. So now they've been playing it for like decades at this point, spending, if you're doing it once a week, it's 52 quid a week, which isn't a huge amount of money for everyone. But for some people it is. And some people spend a lot more than that because their brain is like, you could win millions. You might as well invest thousands in this because then you'll almost definitely win millions. And it's like, that's not how numbers work. In the UK lottery, I think someone worked it out when it was still in its early phases that you had like a 1 in 49 million chance of winning, which means, on average, you'd have to spend £49 million to be likely to win. And often the jackpot isn't that much. It's a very silly thing. I think like a lot of gambling is kind of predicated on it. And I think it's a bad thing for society in general, but it's interesting how it's like regulated differently depending on how it's dressed up. But anyway, going back to the news story, they said there weren't a loot box in Diablo Immortal. There kind of were loot boxes in Diablo Immortal because there's a thing where you can buy gems and you don't know what quality of gem you're going to get, and that kind of constitutes a loot box. People spent a lot of money on it. And so Peggy have fined Activision Blizzard. They've sort of hit them with a fine. and the fine is 5,000 euros, which is nothing. Like 5,000 euros, I imagine, I'm going to go out on a limb and say Blizzard probably made more than 5,000 euros off quite a few individual people doing this. And it's really interesting, the kind of messaging of this, of like, I don't know how many of these court cases have been brought. I know someone else, there was another court case that was brought with a similar kind of idea to another game company where they said, at the same time, where they said, hey, we don't have any loot boxes. And it turned out they actually did have loot boxes. So it's definitely like Blizzard weren't the only one. Let me just find who were the other company that did it. FIFA also did something. Oh, PlayOn got fined with it as well for Hunt Showdown. They had a limited bounty hunter edition where you got some random items in it. But yeah, so PlayOn got hit with the same fine. And it's kind of interesting that I imagine lots of other companies are looking at this and being like, oh, it's annoying we can't do loot boxes anymore. That was making us a bunch of money. And then two companies put essentially loot boxes in their games, don't declare it, get found out later, and then only get charged 5,000 euros. A lot of companies are going to be like, well, that's worth it. Like, we'll take the fine. We don't care about that. Like, we're going to make way more than 5,000 euros. It's like, that's a tiny fine. I heard a thing a few months ago, which I really liked, where they said, like, if the penalty for a crime is a fine, then that law only applies to poor people. Like, this is just a law for poor people. You know, that is a fine. A 5,000 euro fine might be a big deal to, like, an indie developer, to, like, someone really small making games. It literally doesn't matter to big publishers. Like, that's completely irrelevant. They might as well just do it and accept the fines. You know, the same reason you see people parking in stupid places in London or New York, and they just accept the parking tickets because it's like they're happy to pay like 80 quid to have a nice parking space in the middle of central London. Like, they don't care. 80 quid is nothing. So it's just like, it's a very, very silly way of doing business. And it kind of highlights that maybe some of these boards, some of these organizations that are putting the rules on these companies don't have teeth. Like, they don't have something they can do. When you see, like, there's been other fines for companies and it's been like, you know, was it Facebook Meta were fined like £5 billion or something for something they did. That, you know, that would hurt a company. 5 billion would be enough to sink a lot of companies, a lot of gaming companies. And even a big company like, you know, Meta, that's a big chunk of change. That's something that will matter to them. Because, you know, that's 5 billion that they're now not investing in something else. And so, yeah, they need to do something more. Like, if they want to have these rules about gambling and stuff like that, they desperately need to have some more power than that. It's utterly ridiculous, you know, and it's always difficult to know what to do. Like, as an adult, that I would say I'm relatively mature. I don't agree with when, you know, a lot of the time games get taken down from sale. They get made so they can't be published anymore. You see games disappearing all the time from marketplace and stuff like that. And that feels like it's bad in another weird way. It's almost like a weird kind of form of censorship that I'm not a big fan of. I think hitting the profits makes the most sense, but, you know, maybe it should be something like how I think Scandinavian countries do it with speeding tickets, where it's like a percentage of your income. So it's like, you know, you get hit with a speeding ticket, you're paying 5% of your annual income for that speeding ticket. And it's like, that means it's going to hit someone who's very rich, not quite as much as it would someone who's poor, but like still it's going to have a bigger impact on them than it would have if it was just a fixed fine. Having something like that, so like, you know, how much did a game make? But then I know you get into the weeds of like, lots of companies will just say that games didn't make money. You know, probably Take-Two are out there being like, yeah, Grand Theft Auto 5 didn't make any money. Like, we spent all of that on development and research and stuff like that. I know there's lots of weird ways. Was it Star Wars or something where supposedly the original Star Wars never made any money? So all of those people that had royalties baked into their contracts never got paid anything. I think that sort of stuff's pretty common. So yeah, difficult legal issue, but I'm pretty sure a 5,000 euro fine is not the way to settle it. I do kind of, you know, being an idealist, I do just kind of wish these companies had some morality and had like people working in them who were like, yeah, we shouldn't do that because even though it would make us money, that's wrong. You know, that is doing something bad to our customers. And I get that, like, you know, on the internet, the popular the popular running sort of narrative is that big corporations don't care about people, so they're all evil, they're all greedy. The only thing they care about is the bottom line. I don't think, personally, I don't completely subscribe to that. I think the people who are making these decisions are people. Like they're just people. They're just normal men and women. They're just people, and they have a conscience and things like that. And I think a lot of the times where you see companies doing something that comes across as evil, even if you go right the way up to things that are, almost definitely evil, you're looking like Exxon and people like that. Even then, I think what's happening is more a kind of deferred responsibility. That it's like there's not one person who's making this decision. It's like lots of people making tiny decisions, trying to do their job, that all add up to a big decision that ends up causing massive problems. And I think that's doubly true of something that's, fundamentally not as evil, the gaming industry. I think a lot of the time what's happening is like various people along the way are like, someone in a board meeting is like, oh, hey, we could do like this kind of award people could buy. And then someone's like, yeah, that sounds good. And then they set the price and everything. And then someone else is like, how could we make this more valuable to the player? And they're like, well, how about if we had a chance that when you buy it, you get something much better? And it's like, everyone signs off on that being like, that sounds like a good thing. And then when you look at like the end result, you look at it and be like, oh, this is incredibly manipulative and seems like it's going to lead to a lot of people losing a lot of money gambling. And it's like, I don't think there's that many people in any industry, but including the gaming industry, I don't think there's that many people who are sitting there being like, let's see how we can manipulate people with gambling addictions into giving us as much money as possible. Of course, those people do exist. Of course, there are people like that, but I don't think it's the majority of people. And so I think like a lot of the time, if maybe some of these corporations had more human responsibility, like individuals being like, hey, your name is on the line for this, like this is your decision, then maybe you would get a little bit less of the evil, a little bit less of the bad stuff happening. And going with these court fines, stuff like that. What about if it was like, hey, who's responsible for this? And then the person who's responsible for this, they get a penalty. And it's like, tying someone's individual liberty to a decision. I don't know, maybe it just needs corporations to just like get rid of them as a fall guy. Who knows? But I'd like to think people just aren't inherently evil. That would be nice. Anyway, that's all come from a 5,000. That's all come from a €5,000 fine. A little bit of philosophy and ethics going in there. Right. Other news, we have the Destiny 2 Season of the Deep launched yesterday. This is the second season for Destiny's, not Beyond Light. What the hell's this expansion called? What is this called? Lightfall. That's what it's called. This expansion is the second season for it. In the past, second seasons in Destiny have been quite good because normally it's like, the first season is much more concerned with people are doing the campaign, people are trying out all the new features, blah, blah, blah. Then the second season tends to be the one where they address a lot of the big problems that people have with the expansion. They add a lot more kind of flavor stuff. It's normally a lot more about the like ongoing spirit of the game of that expansion rather than being about, a big dump of content. And it seems like this one, it looks like there's some cool stuff in it. We're getting Titan back, which is one of the locations where it's like a giant sea-covered planet. There's fishing in it, which is pretty fun. There's some cool armor and stuff like that. Lots of changes to lots of exotics. I think we get some new strand aspects. So every class has something new to play with, some new abilities and things like that. Just some cool stuff. Like just some cool, fun, like quality of life stuff. And things that should make everything more interesting. And then there's a new dungeon coming on Friday. Sadly, I don't have like a group to play the new dungeon with, so I don't know if I'll be playing that or not. I might see if Kel is about. I might see if I can get someone to hop on. But generally, my big problem with Destiny is that I love playing it, but nobody ever bloody watches me stream it. I've streamed it quite a lot in the past, like raids and stuff like that, and I get like 10 viewers. Like no one watches me play Destiny. So I don't know if I'll be covering that at all. One of the things that was kind of interesting yesterday was that the servers were like absolutely screwed. And, this is a Bungie game, but, backed up by Sony and everything like that. They kind of broke off from Activision a while ago, Bungie did. And yeah, like I saw people on Twitter complaining that they still couldn't get into the game 3 hours after it released. Like 3 hours, that's quite a long time. And it made me think, like, Tactical Brit, I saw posted a tweet yesterday where he was, I'm sure he was like raging about something that had happened in Warzone Ranked, but he was saying, you know, like, Activision servers are so bad, like, no other AAA game has these kind of problems. And it's like, they definitely do. Like, you know, I feel like every game at this scale does have problems. I know I've had problems before with Fortnite, where I've been trying to get into the events and stuff like that, and the server that I happen to be on crashed, or people haven't been able to get in and stuff like that. And I've had some, you know, pretty bad lag and things like that in Fortnite before. With Destiny, people not being able to get into this. I know Apex, lots of people have been complaining about the server performance lately. I think, like, I was talking a lot about it on the stream last night, that a lot of these games are just too ambitious. Like, a lot of these games are, in my mind at least, constantly trying to push the envelope, trying to push up against what's actually possible with the hardware, with the network infrastructure we have in the world right now. I remember talking to a Warzone developer quite a long time ago now, like months and months ago, just in like Twitter DMs. And he was saying about how, you know, like a lot of the problems that, this was back in the Verdansk days, a lot of the problems that they had with doing events, you know, like the zombies and stuff coming in on the Vodjanoi, come down to the MTU size, you know, the amount of information that can be stored in kind of one packet that's being sent across the internet. And saying, like, that hasn't actually changed for like a long, basically since the internet's been around. It was because it was like set at a certain value back when the internet was in its infancy, and it was that kind of thing of people going, oh, well, like, this is more information than anyone would possibly need to send at once. You know, like how lots of people thought, like, 1 GB hard drives, that's insanely huge. No one's ever going to need more storage than that. Like that kind of thinking. And then it kind of got set and built into all of the hardware that the internet runs on. So all of those various, you know, servers and like connections between things all run on this same idea of like everything expects the MTU size to be the same. And then nowadays, games are like hitting up against that of like, okay, if you know, for however many updates you can send out a second. Oh my God, there's a massive swarm of bees outside. I need to shut all the windows. I'm back. There's a giant swarm of bees outside. Like, that was crazy. Like, it literally looked like there was a cloud outside the house. Just twice in like 3 days that I've seen a giant swarm of bees here. That was crazy. Just so many bees. So many bees. They're obviously like doing that thing where they look for a new hive. And I don't want them to make the new hive in my house. So when I see the big swarm, I go and shut the doors. But it's weird that that's happened like twice in a week. Oh dear. I'm good. What is at the window? Just bees. So many bees. It was great. I just looked up out the window and it was just like a dark cloud going past. And I was like, what's that? And it was just bees. They've gone now. Like, I don't know where they've gone. There's a load of big trees behind our house. I'm slightly worried that they've gone to take up residence somewhere. But yeah, that was fun. Anyway, going on, yeah, talking about the servers and stuff. Yeah, the MTU size, that's what I was talking about. And yeah, he was just saying about how it's kind of a lot of the things that people complain about in, you know, were complaining about in Warzone, and lots of things that people like jumped conclusions about was actually just to do with this. It's just to do with this one thing that's, you know, like something that can't be changed about the internet, because it's not like one game could be like, hey, we want to change the MTU size to something bigger. Can we change it to like, you know, 500 kilobytes now? And then, you know, everyone has to agree to it. Like everyone in the world who uses the internet has to agree to it. And it's like, for most purposes, it doesn't matter. It's just really gaming. You know, it's unlikely to happen. So that means they just have to find ways to kind of, you know, do the best they can and find clever ways to get around it. But I think they're always pushing it. They're always hitting it. They're always hitting that limit. And, you know, you get all of these weird problems, you know, audio and lag and servers crashing and graphical issues and physics issues. And all of them could be something to do with, something like that, where it's like they're hitting up against a limit that they can't change. And therefore, there isn't really a solution to it. Like, there isn't a good solution to it. And I think, like, all big AAA games now that are trying to handle dozens of players at once are coming against these issues of, like, network infrastructure is not upgrading. It's not changing that much. Download speeds and upload speeds are getting faster, but that doesn't really make that much of a difference. The very sort of basic building blocks of the internet aren't changing. And there's other things that are just very, very hard to stop. People like DDoSing and stuff like that. The geography, the problem of, the speed of light and geography. I saw someone the other day was complaining about lag in going back to Warzone. Someone was complaining about lag in Warzone. They were like, "Oh, these servers are crap. Like, why are all the games so laggy?" And they were also playing with an American who they were letting host so they could get on American servers because they thought they were easier. And it's like, well, maybe there's some lag because you're trying to play a game that requires sort of lightning fast reflexes, but with a connection that's going across an entire ocean. It's like maybe that might be part of the issue there. And, there's problems like that about if you've got people playing in Australia and, America and Europe, and South Africa, and they're all trying to play together. There's things that you can't get around. Like, there's just laws of the universe that are kind of immovable that are going to be a problem. And so I think, like, a lot of these things where when we're talking about there being big server problems for Warzone or for Destiny or, Diablo next week, Overwatch, Apex, all of these things, Fortnite, I think the only way that any of those things are going to get solved is if games maybe try to, just cut down a little bit. If games try to narrow their scope a little bit, stop being quite so ambitious, that would be good. Sorry, I just saw Why So Salty being like, unless you have allergies, then bees are harmless and good for the area. That's true. I'm sure bees are lovely. Everyone knows how good bees are. But also, I don't want a swarm of them in my house. That's why I went and shut the windows. I do not want bees everywhere in my house. I don't want any swarms of anything in my house. A swarm of something in your house is a bad day. But yeah. So I genuinely think, like, with all of these server problems that all of the big games are having now, I just think it's something where, like, the scope needs to change. Like, the idea of, like, how much is happening and how much is doing maybe needs to be narrowed down. And I don't think it would be a bad thing. Like, I think you can have games that are really good and really sort of polished and finely tuned with smaller player counts, smaller maps, less guns, less different mechanics and stuff like that going on. I feel like there's a space for that in the AAA, in the sort of the AAA scene. But I guess, it's much more impressive when people can boast, like, bigger player counts and bigger maps. People, I'm sure when Starfield is revealed properly in the June showcase, there's going to be people being like, but how big is the map? Like, how big is the solar system? How big are the maps on the planets that you get to land? And that's what people will care about. And when GTA 6 gets revealed, people will be like, how big's the map? How many players can we have in GTA Online? Like, there's this weird obsession as if, like, just the numbers being bigger actually matter, which they clearly don't. Like, is Skyrim a better or worse game than Red Dead Redemption 2 because it's got a bigger or smaller map? Like, I've got no idea which one of those games has a bigger map. I've got no idea which one of those games has more NPCs on it or anything like that. It just doesn't matter because the quality of the game is, the important thing. It doesn't matter. I've really sort of, like, long wished for a game like Warzone or Firestorm or something like that, where, like, they really, really cut down everything to the point where it's like a much, much, much smaller map. I'm talking about, like, 10 players going into a battle royale and then fighting amongst themselves, but like a really interesting, finely detailed small map. I feel like that would be, if anything, more interesting. Rainbow Six Siege did a good job of that, of, like, the maps are super dense, super complex, super interesting. You don't have many players on a thing, but each player has, a set of abilities and things like that. I feel like that is much more interesting in lots of ways than having these games, like Battlefield 2042, where they were like, we're going to have 128 people on every map. And it just was like, okay, but this doesn't make anything better, and it makes the game run terribly. Like, it makes the game awful. So yeah, I genuinely think it's fine. I don't think they're in the roof. They're not in the roof, because if they were in the roof, I would be able to hear them. You can hear everything that goes on the roof. The hatch for the roof is just behind me. But yeah, thankfully they are not in the roof. We heard a swarm of bees like that the other day, and when we were walking down the street, like, God, it was loud. Like, unbelievably loud. Just then I could hear them pretty loud, but that's because the window was open, I guess. Right. Anyway, going on to the next news story. This is more personal news, really, but it applies to all of you as part of my community. We have a Call of Duty community night on Saturday at 8 p.m. This is a thing organised by Call of Duty UK, so the UK branch of the Call of Duty socials team. They are running their community nights again, starting them up. This used to be a thing a few years ago that we did these community nights. And, you know, we had mixed success of them. Some of them were great, some of them weren't so great. But we're doing it a bit differently. Back then, it was more like we had a challenge to do, and I would keep on rotating people into my team, and we'd try and get it done. This time, it's going to be proper, like, custom games. It's focused around the Call of Duty UK community, but everyone's welcome. I spoke to the community manager, and he didn't say, I specifically asked, like, are we okay to give prizes to people that don't live in the UK? And he's like, yeah, whatever. He doesn't mind too much. So it's open to everybody. It's going to be at 8 p.m. on Saturday, so 8 p.m. British time. I think that's 3 p.m. on the east coast of the US. Maybe like 12 o'clock noon on the west coast of the US, and obviously 9 p.m. in Europe, Central Europe. So we're going to be doing community night. We're going to be running custom games. Probably at least 4 games we'll be running of Warzone, just Warzone solos. Depending on how many people we have, like, it might be that they're full games. It might be that they're mini royales. Well, I'm not really sure. Again, it just depends how many people are signing up for stuff like that. We've got 4 prizes to win, which is why we're doing 4 games. So the first 3 games, you'll be able to win a code for 2,400 COD points. And then in the final game of the night, you will be able to win a Black Cell code. So if you've completed your Battle Pass, you'll be able to put that code in, and then it will unlock all of those Black Cell operators and skins and stuff like that you would have got. Anyone can join. I'm happy for anyone to join. I would say the focus is kind of on having a laugh. Like, I'm not really interested in people being, like, hyper competitive. I'm not interested in, like, smack talking and stuff like that. The idea is to keep it positive. You know, we always talk on the podcast about how I don't think, like, Call of Duty being competitive is the best thing. Let's go for more of those Mario Kart vibes of everyone having a laugh. It doesn't really matter who wins. We'll just try and enjoy ourselves. But that's all going to be happening over at twitch.tv/Geeky Pastimes. So if you want to join, I'll probably start the stream a little bit before 8 o'clock, maybe like 7:30. And then we'll start the lobbies from 8, where we'll get, you know, it'll be first come, first serve. But I imagine there'll be space for everybody. And we'll try and get everyone doing. I would really appreciate as many people as possible turning out for that, because you need 50 people to start the games. And the more people we have, the quicker we can start the games, and there's less waiting around and stuff like that. So make sure you hang out. If you want to go retweet my tweet on Twitter about it, that would be appreciated, because, again, the more people we have, the more fun it is. I will also have stuff in the Discord where, you know, we'll have some voice chat lobbies and stuff like that set up for people that want to do that. Right, carrying back to the news, we've still got another set of stories to go through. The Sony showcases tonight. We've talked about this a little bit on the podcast a few times already. It's happening at 9 p.m. UK time. There's some games that we're expecting to see. So, you know, Spider-Man 2, I imagine we'll have gameplay for that. People are expecting The Last of Us multiplayer mode to make an appearance, Last of Us Factions. I'm not sure if that's actually been confirmed. I've been talking about it as if it is, but I don't know if we know that we're going to see Factions. I don't know if they've announced anywhere that we are. I've seen lots of people saying that we expect a Twisted Metal game because the TV show's coming out sometime soon. Again, I'm not sure if that's actually confirmed that a Twisted Metal game is in the works. I was thinking, like, a Twisted Metal game, for it to do well, would have to be, like, spectacular. It would have to be so good. Like, there'd have to be some really cool, like, physics interactions or something. Because I think the gameplay of those kind of old vehicle combat games, I never played Twisted Metal, but I played a lot of Vigilante 8 and Vigilante 8 Second Offense. Of those games, you know, it's pretty dated now. It's pretty hard to go back and play those games. But we'll see for sure whether that's going to happen, whether we're going to get that working. So, yeah, hopefully we'll get some Twisted Metal. Hopefully, like, that'll be fun. I'm not sure what else. I'm not sure what else people want to see. I would love to see something like a new Killzone or a new MotorStorm. I think like getting some of those, classic Sony franchises back would be a lot of fun. Maybe we'll see things like Death Stranding 2, maybe we'll see Silent Hill 2, some of that kind of thing. There's been lots and lots of other like little rumors about other games that I don't want to spoil here, and please don't in chat. I don't want like to spoil anything for people that haven't seen those rumors, so that'd be good. But there's other games that people have talked about saying like, oh, maybe there'll be this happening. So we'll see. I think the thing that I would be most excited about, the thing that would be like my dream announcement for tonight, is if Last of Us Factions is shadow dropped today. If they're like, hey, Last of Us Factions, look at this, and they do like a big sort of deep dive for like 10 minutes, showing off all the systems and everything, and they're like, you can download it now, and then, I'll hop on and play, even if I can't bloody talk because of my tongue. I'll still hop on and give that a go. So that would be like my favorite. That would be the best thing for me. Would be if they shadow dropped something like that. I wouldn't be surprised if we got something today, even if it's just like a demo of something or a beta. We're not going to get Mortal Kombat tonight, I don't think, because they've already said that they're going to have the gameplay world premiere at Summer Games Fest in a couple of weeks on June 8th. So we're not going to be seeing gameplay of Mortal Kombat just yet. I imagine we'll probably get updates. It wouldn't be surprising to see a bit more from Final Fantasy 16 and from Street Fighter 6 and, all of these things. Some PSVR 2 stuff. There'll be a bunch of that kind of stuff that I'm not that excited about, to be honest, because, it's stuff that we already know about. But I'm sure there'll be a lot of that. I think I thought they said this was going to be an hour and a half, but then I saw a thing yesterday saying that it was just going to be an hour. So if it's just an hour and you assume like 10 minutes of it will be Spider-Man 2, maybe 10 minutes of it will be Last of Us Factions, then you've got 40 minutes for all of these other things that they're going to show off. It'll be interesting to see what's happening. High Lord of Terror just said, I don't really play Warzone, but would totally jump on for a custom. Sounds like fun. That's the spirit. I want as many people as possible. People who don't normally play Warzone. People who are just like, people who are maybe put off by the kind of how difficult Warzone can be. The customs are a lot of fun. Like the customs, you can just sort of relax a bit more, have a bit of a laugh. And it's quite nice, like recognizing a lot of the names of the people who are there. If there's any other creators watching and they're like, hey, like, I'd like to do something like this for my community, just come in and join in with this one. And then, maybe you'll be able to host one in a future week if this goes well. But yeah, like supporting it would be very much appreciated, supporting the event on Saturday. So please do that. Right. Why So Salty said, I'd like an out-and-out PlayStation 5 new-gen engine exclusive, something new. Yeah, it does still feel like, to me at least, that this generation of consoles hasn't had that. Like, we haven't had a game where that I could point to and say, this is something that could only exist on this generation and is like a classic that people are going to remember. Like, we just haven't had that at all yet. You look back and it's like, the games that people have really liked, like Elden Ring was on last Gen 2, God of War Ragnarok was on last Gen 2, Forspoken was fine, but it wasn't like the best thing ever. I'm not sure that might have been on last Gen 2, I don't actually know. It feels like, the Demon Souls remake was fine, but it wasn't amazing, and it was a remake. Astrobot was fun, but it was, very, very short, sort of like little mini-game type thing. I don't feel like we've had something that is definitively a PS5 or an Xbox Series X game yet. Especially not one that's been super impressive. And that's a real shame. Like, that kind of sucks. And everyone in chat, don't go to Texas P8's barbecue on Saturday. Come play Warzone. Don't go to his barbecue. Yeah, Texas. I'm gonna have loads of people, maybe. They're like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe you could do both. Do your barbecue, but then set up Warzone on a big screen in your garden. Affa's just said, surely that's going to be GTA 6. What, the big current gen game? I would say with GTA 6, I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't come out till like the next generation. I'm not saying it will, but it wouldn't surprise me, because these consoles came out in 2020. It's 2023 now. Generally, what games console lifespan is, 5-6 years. I wouldn't be surprised if GTA 6 is like pushing on for maybe even cross-gen with the next generation. I wouldn't even be that surprised if it came out on last generation. Bear in mind, GTA 5 didn't come out on the last generation. GTA 5 came out on the Xbox 360. Like, that's insane. That blows my mind, the thought that GTA 5 came out 2 generations ago. Like, that's just absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. But you know, maybe GTA 6 will be a big like current gen only thing. It's one of those games that I can easily imagine, especially because it's been worked on for so long. I can easily imagine it being available on Xbox One and PS4 as well. We'll see how it's going. Yeah, Why So Salty is going to be there for the community games, but we'll see. I mean, we'll see with the showcase tonight whether Sony have something that they can say is, you know, definitively PlayStation 5. Other than, you know, maybe the PSVR stuff, maybe that's what they're counting on being for it. Who knows? Maybe. It'd be interesting to see, you know, I was trying to think of what kind of big surprises they could do today. It's like, if they did do, you know, an actual Last of Us Part 3 teaser trailer, or Final Fantasy, whatever the new one's called, Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, or whatever it's called. Something like that amazing. Alpha said the last gen was 7 years. 5 to 7 years is the lifespan of consoles. Would you a PlayStation 5 Slim or Pro soon if they follow past updates? Yeah, I mean, I don't think it needs it right now. Like, if they brought out a PlayStation 5 Pro, I don't think even I'd buy it. And I love buying new consoles when they came out, but like, I'd just be like, what's the point? Like, the games I play on my PlayStation 5 now are generally games that were available on the PlayStation 4. You know, I'm playing like, I play Warzone, or I'll play Destiny, or I'll play Fortnite. Like, I don't really play any PlayStation 5 games, and none of the games that I play feel like, oh, I wish I had more capable hardware that would run this better. It's like games are running at, like, a lot of them are running 120 frames a second, or like 4K HDR and everything. They look really good. Like, there's not really a need for something like the PS4 Pro or the Xbox One X right now. Same with the Xbox Series X. I love my Xbox Series X, but I'm mostly playing Xbox One games on it, and they look great and they perform great. I just don't have something. The only game I would say that I've played on my Xbox where I was like, I wish this was more capable hardware, was Microsoft Flight Simulator. Like, that's the only game I've played where it's like, oh, this would be cool if like the Xbox Series X was even more powerful. Maybe. Right, going on to the next news story, because the Sony showcase, I'm sure we'll be talking about it. If I do run a podcast tomorrow, we'll be talking about it then. If I don't run a podcast, we'll be talking about it on Friday. So I'm sure we'll talk about all of that stuff then. Alone in the Dark is being shown off this week. This is a reboot of the Alone in the Dark game. I had sort of forgotten that this was a thing, but, you know, I'm kind of interested, because Alone in the Dark 1, the very first Alone in the Dark, was the first game that I remember scaring me. The first game that I genuinely found frightening. I think it was the first proper, like, you know, horror game that felt like a sort of, you know, 3D survival horror type thing. It was terrifying. And in the original, you were going around this mansion trying to investigate the death of somebody. And like, if you went into a living room, there was this weird whirlwind monster that would be like, more, 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 more. And I found it so scary, like just absolutely terrifying. But yeah, they're doing a reboot of that. Instead of it being in a mansion, it's set in like an insane asylum, and you're not investigating a death, you're trying to find a missing person. It will be interesting to see like whether they manage to capture the sort of fear of it. I don't know. Like, I don't know whether it will just end up being like a stealth game, which would kind of suck. You know, like, I've been moaning about this a bit when I was playing Outlast Trials, that I'm just not a fan of those horror games where the only real mechanic is you are looking out for the monsters, and then you try to hope they don't notice you, or you run away from them, or you sneak past them. I kind of like, I think in the first Alone in the Dark, it was much more like there were kind of puzzly ways to get past each monster or each ghost. And that kind of was the interesting thing about the game, where it's like, hey, this will come get you unless you do this. And it's, you know, there's some interaction, some thing about the environment that lets you get past it. I would quite like that if that was how the game went on. So, you know, it's like each area has some sort of monster and stuff, and then you find like there's a way to negate it, or there's a way to stop it from hurting you. That isn't just sneak past it and hope it doesn't see you. But yeah, the THQ showcase where they're going to show that off is on Friday, but it's at 1 a.m. in the morning in the UK, which sucks. So I'm not going to watch that. I'll, you know, find out what happened afterwards. Thursday evening in the US, so American people, you might have a better job of being able to see that. But yeah, so there is a THQ showcase, but it's at a stupid time. Oof, got a bit of stomachache. Probably just nerves about having to go to a bloody hospital. And then we've got finally, for the final proper news item, we've got a game announcement, and everybody loves game announcements. Formula One Manager 2023 is coming out. And this is one of those game announcements where it's like, oh yeah, obviously. Like, obviously they're going to do another one of those games. The last one, Formula Manager 2022, was a really good game if you're into Formula One. Super interesting, super in-depth, like a lot of fun to do it. they're bringing out a new game. It's going to have the new circuits in, obviously, so it's going to have the Las Vegas circuit in, all of the new information for the new teams. For anyone who doesn't know what it is, it's what you expect. You take over one of the 10 Formula One teams and you make decisions. You buy and sell drivers, you recruit staff, you build development facilities, you research car parts and stuff like that. Then on race weekends, you come up with strategies. I would personally say that, like, for me, at least in F1 Manager 2022, there was too much micromanagement. Like, there was a lot of micromanagement in it, to the point where it's, you telling drivers when to push and when to back off and stuff. And it's like, I'd like it if that was an option, but not the default option. I'd like it if the default option was much more like, you worry about the cars and the staff, and then the staff that you hire make those decisions, make the decisions about the micromanagement during the race and stuff like that. And then you look at their performance and decide, how to shift things around. That would be better to me. But it looks fun. There's a little bit more of an increased focus on, like, drama in it by the looks of it. So they were saying in a press release that there's going to be a bit more of, like, cars will spin out, cars will lock up on turns, pit crews will mess up and stuff like that. And then that will have an effect on morale. And then, if morale gets low, drivers are more likely to make mistakes, or maybe they won't push as much as they should. Pit stops are more likely to make mistakes. The pit crews will make mistakes more if they're being, exhausted, or if they've had a particularly bad day. So there's, like, a little bit more of that kind of human management, which I think that's kind of interesting. That's something that I'm looking forward to, just having some more random things happen in races that then you've got to deal with. Because, like, really in Formula One, like, that's the more interesting thing, I think. It's like, there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes of car development and stuff like that, and that's great. But when it comes to watching a race, it's always boring if everything just goes to plan for every team. Like, you want teams to have to deal with stuff. You want teams to be, like, to have to react to different things and see how they react, how they think on their feet, and then whether they win or lose based on those decisions. Like, that's a much more interesting part of it. So it looks like F1 Manager 2023 is going to double down on that a little bit. So I'll almost definitely be streaming that when it comes out. I'm looking forward to it. I've also got some coverage of Formula One 2023 coming later this week. On the 26th, I'm allowed to post some stuff about that. So if anyone's interested in Formula One, then be sure to check out that. I should have a video and maybe a bit of a cheeky stream for it as well. I think I can stream an hour of it on Friday. So that might be interesting. Then let's get on to, first of all, actually, I was going to get onto a big topic that I wanted to discuss for a while. But before that, I have a hot take from reading Twitter earlier. And this is my controversial opinion of the day. Just the one. You can ignore anything else that I've said that's controversial today. I saw someone, I thought they were joking, and they were talking about, like, hey, look, this person's scientifically proven that aim assist is, like, too good, blah, blah, blah. Talking about, aim assist on controllers versus mouse and keyboard. And I thought they were joking, but then I read the tweet and realized they're actually being serious. And there's this weird thing right now where lots of people are complaining that aim assist on controller is too strong. And you know how it goes. You know both sides of this argument. They haven't changed for, a couple of years now, where it's basically mouse and keyboard players who are like, this is the better way to play. Like, mouse and keyboard is more accurate, blah, blah, blah. But then they complain because they get beaten by controller players, and they're like, well, the controller players aren't better with controller. They just have aim assist doing all of the aiming for them, so they don't even have to aim. And that means that they've got a big advantage. And then, people will bring out some video of, like, finding the perfect situation where aim assist has the maximum effect. And they'll be like, hey, look, aim assist, I'm not even touching the sticks, or I'm touching the sticks a tiny bit. But the aim assist is tracking them perfectly with zero latency. And, humans can't possibly compete against that. They need to tone it down. And I just don't understand this argument at all. As someone that plays on both keyboard and mouse and controller fairly regularly, I tend to play more controller just because I jump between Xbox and PlayStation and PC a lot. And so it's easier to use, like, the same controller all the time rather than constantly jumping between two different methods. But I still play a lot of games keyboard and mouse, just because if you play a lot of games on PC, you end up having to do that because controller support is sometimes bad. But it's, as someone that plays both, it doesn't really make that much difference. And I think, this comes back to what we were talking about the other day with the hyper-competitive stuff ruining gaming, basically. Like, the people who take these games so seriously and want to compete at the highest level, basically, turning the whole thing into this weird toxic cesspool of like, for most people, for normal people, whether you want to use a controller or mouse and keyboard, both work and both have, you know, advantages and disadvantages. It's a lot easier to snipe with mouse and keyboard. It's a lot easier to track people up close with a controller while you're moving around. But generally, you know, like someone who's playing with a mouse and keyboard isn't always going to win or always going to lose. Someone who's playing with a controller isn't always going to win or always going to lose. Your individual skill and all of that sort of stuff matters a lot more. But, you know, if you're talking about the very highest levels, like the very highest levels of play, some people find ways to exploit aim assist to make it work for them so it's much more powerful. And people who use mouse and keyboard, some people who practice hours and hours a day at mouse and keyboard can do things that people on controller can never do. You know, they can spin 180 degrees and then land pixel perfect shots. And it's like, that might be true. Like, you take it to the extremes, and yes, there's some weirdness there, but it just doesn't matter. Because most people are in the middle, most people are just playing normally, and that's where everything is tuned for, like all of the different input methods. And like this is a thing that a few years ago, there was, I remember with Shadowrun on the Xbox 360 was like one of the first games that I can remember at least that was crossplay. So people on PC could play against people on the Xbox 360. It was a first-person shooter game, like a team game where it was like magical abilities, but also shooting and stuff like that. It was an awesome game. I really enjoyed it. But yeah, so in Shadowrun, I remember there being a big thing of people being like, oh my god, like controller players are going to be up against PC players. They're going to get absolutely dominated. They don't stand a chance. Like, it's just going to be super unfair. And then in reality, it was just kind of fine. Like, it was like, okay, well, people on PC probably do have an advantage in some situations on mouse and keyboard, but it doesn't really matter. Like, it doesn't really make a big difference. And then there was a phase sort of during the Xbox 360 and then going all the way up to now, really, where on console games, there were various devices that would let you use mouse and keyboard in games. And, you know, now the consoles just accept mouse and keyboard. You can just plug one in. It works fine. But they accepted it. And then there was a big argument of like, this is unfair. You know, games like Rainbow Six Siege, people using mouse and keyboard are much more accurate. They're much faster. And so, like, we should probably have separate lobbies. And I remember when Fortnite announced crossplay, there was a big thing of like, we need to make sure the different inputs have their own matchmaking. So controllers against controller, mouse and keyboards against mouse and keyboard, and we'll just keep them all separately. And then over time, people are like, nah, it doesn't make that much difference, to be honest. Like, again, maybe in the top like 1% of skill levels, it makes a big difference, but in general, it doesn't matter. It doesn't make that much difference to most people. With Rainbow Six Siege, it probably does a little bit because as far as I know, there isn't any aim assist on that on controller. So that makes a bit more difference. But most games where have found a way to balance it, where it's like, yeah, controller gets a bit of aim assist, so like you're more controlling, like you control the big sweeps with your control stick, and then you can make small little movements to try and like tighten it up. And the middle part of that, the kind of tracking and stuff, you're assisted with aim assist. That's generally how it's worked, and people have been like, yeah, that works pretty well. So now people who are on controller can compete against people who are mouse and keyboard, and it's mostly fair. It's mostly fine. And it's just funny that like this was a big problem for gaming, like a big issue where people are like, people on mouse and keyboard and controller can never play together. And now they can play together, and people are like trying to pick out problems. And one of the things that I was thinking about this morning that led me to put this on the agenda was, I thought I saw a bee in here. I think it's just a fly. I'm going to be paranoid about this all the rest of the evening. I can definitely hear some buzzing. Maybe they did go in the roof. Oh, God. Anyway, yeah, like, I vividly remember when there was the whole thing of, you know, when people thought that mouse and keyboard and controller couldn't possibly compete because controller would never be as good as mouse and keyboard. I used to play quite a lot of games on the PC using a controller. And it was for exactly the same reason I do now. It was just, I play a lot of games on console. Switching over to PC, sometimes I just found it easier to use a controller. Especially, there's been various times in my life where I haven't had a desk or anything. My PC has just been hooked up to the TV in the living room, and therefore I would rather use a controller sitting in the living room on a sofa rather than trying to use a mouse and keyboard. Because trying to use a mouse when you're sitting on a sofa is a pain. It's just annoying. So I would use a controller. And there's been loads of times where it's like, okay, I was using a controller and things weren't, for games like Battlefield and stuff like that. And it was tough. And occasionally I'd be like, oh, it's annoying. Yeah, I'm like using a controller. I just like can't snipe as accurately or I can't spin around as quickly. And then people would be like, well, just use keyboard and mouse then. And that was the response. The people who use keyboard and mouse were like, well, you could just use keyboard and mouse. It's not our fault you chose to use a controller. Just use keyboard and mouse. And now there seems to be this idea that controller is an advantage, that having aim assist is a bigger advantage than using keyboard and mouse and being able to aim precisely and stuff like that. Because of rotational aim assist and blah, 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 all of this incredibly boring stuff. And there isn't the same feeling of, well, why don't you just use a controller? If you think controller's such a better way to play, why don't you just use that then? And that doesn't seem to work. That doesn't seem to make those people happy. It's much more now, it's like, no, I need to be able to use keyboard and mouse. I just want keyboard and mouse to be better than controller. And, it's like, it's obvious. Like, if you look through it really, when people are complaining about this, it's just another thing for people to blame it on, isn't it? Like when they lose. Like, that's all it is. It's just another one of these things, like when people complain about the server refresh rate, or people complain about the meta, or people complain about whatever is the flavor of the month, latency, lag, ping, whatever. It's another thing where they can say, oh, I didn't lose because I'm bad. I lost because X, Y, and Z. And, I lost because they're on a controller. And you hear it all the time. You play with people with keyboard and mouse, and it's like, oh, they got me a bloody aim assist. As if, like, if things were fair, I easily would have beaten them. I'm obviously better than them, but they happened to beat me this time because of aim assist, or because of the server refresh rate, or because of whatever. It's just another one of those, and it's very funny once you start thinking about it that way and you start reading these tweets and these Reddit posts, these subreddit things. It's just sort of like so obvious what's going on. It's like, if you do think a controller is a much better form of input for the game that you play all of the time, just use a controller. Like, just use the thing that you think is better. In the same way that I think using a better controller is better than using a bad controller. That's why I use a better controller. Like, I don't use the bad controller because it's bad. I've got this tiny little Xbox controller. Look at this little like tiny Xbox controller. It's like absolutely little, like blah, blah, blah. I don't use this because it wouldn't be very good. Like, I could, but I don't use it because I'm not going to like hinder myself. I'm not sure there's that many people in the world who have to use mouse and keyboard and couldn't possibly use a controller. It seems absolutely bizarre to me. But yeah, anyway, I just thought that was funny. I was just reading some angry tweets about aim assist earlier, and it's like, well, just chill out. Like, it's not that much of a big deal. I genuinely think, like, for most people, it's just about the same. It's probably a lot easier for a lot of people to play using control than it is mouse and keyboard, because more people play games with a controller. Like, more people have grown up playing games on consoles. Not that many people have really grown up playing games using a mouse and keyboard, especially first-person shooters. So it's like the majority of people use it. I saw someone on one of these tweets this morning, someone was like, oh, well, it used to be that only 5% of FPS players used controller, but now I bet it's more like 95%. And it's like, A, where the hell are you getting that statistic from? Like, where would possibly be the source of that information? But also, B, is that maybe because it used to be that first-person shooter multiplayer games were pretty much exclusively on PC only, especially online ones were only on PC, thinking back of the days of the original Counter-Strike and Quake and stuff like that, and Unreal Tournament, until the Xbox 360. That was really the first time that we had a lot of people playing, a lot of FPS games, that generation, which wasn't that long ago. That's when GTA 5 came out. That generation was when people started playing first-person shooters on console. So maybe that's why there's been a switch, rather than it being because there's some big conspiracy of people, being like, oh, aim assist is the way forwards. Even like, if there was a conspiracy, like, who would it be for? Like, who would be designing this thing and being like, I'm going to make life really difficult for mouse and keyboard users? Like, who cares? Unless, people who make controllers maybe are like having some secret cabal of like trying to convince people, and the people who make keyboards and mice don't have the same kind of evil influence. They're not in the same part of the Illuminati, maybe. So I'll go through some of the comments in the chat just before we move on to the last thing that I wanted to talk about, which, to be honest, I don't know if we're going to have time for. Don't forget to like the stream, by the way. Come on, there's 40 of you, but only 19 likes. Like the stream. And just going through that. Oh, AFA's scientifically proven. Yeah, is that the tweet that I saw? I saw some people retweeting and I just thought it was very funny. Scientifically proven, and like the whole thing that they were saying was scientifically proven was that they had two videos of like one was someone using a mouse and keyboard to like try and keep up with a moving thing, and it was always the thing of like sometimes the figure would move and then someone's reaction time would take a little second to like catch up to it, and then it was showing rotational aim assist. Again, if you're in like whenever they show these aim assist videos, it's when the enemy is doing something that you know what they're going to do, so you can set it up perfectly. So it's like you're already center mass, the enemy's moving in a certain place where rotational aim assist is like they're moving at the right speed at the right distance, where it all matches up perfectly as long as you don't change the inputs. Obviously in a real game you're constantly changing the inputs, you're trying to aim yourself, you're trying to move, to look around, all of that stuff. And so that's why aim assist works that way, is because generally you're essentially fighting the aim assist and it has to be a little bit stronger to have any effect at all. But if you do happen to be staring at someone and then they start moving fairly slowly and you don't touch the sticks too much, then yeah, like the aim assist will be really, really good. And obviously some people learn there's specific situations where you can probably exploit that. But those people are just weird. Like, who cares about them? But yeah, it was a silly tweet. It was a very silly tweet. Anyway, Ultracart said, I don't even notice aim assist on my Xbox, to be honest. Don't seem to do anything on my console. Yeah, like, I mean, when I play, very occasionally, aim assist will do something weird. Like, when you're dropping in Warzone, then sometimes someone will fly past you and the aim assist will be like, whoop, and like change the way you're looking. Sometimes you'll be aiming at someone in distance and then someone will walk in front of you and then the aim assist will start trying to follow them. It's like stuff like that where it takes me by surprise. Then I notice it. A lot of the time, I mean, you've all seen my gameplay. I use a controller. I miss all the bloody time. I miss so many shots. But apparently, aim assist should be doing all the work for me, so I shouldn't have to aim at all. It's very silly. Why So Salty said, BS, I tried mouse and keyboard last night for the first time ever, and the mouse is so much more accurate. It's personal preference. Keyboard is a nightmare for me. Yeah, like, I mean, mouse and keyboard definitely does have some advantages that people don't like to talk about. You can change the direction you're looking at much, much quicker than you can on console. And if you're good with mouse and keyboard, you can do things that is like absolutely insane, sort of like just looking straight at people's heads. I think a lot of the time when people think that they see someone cheating, what they're actually seeing is someone who's just good with a mouse. And you can even do things like even on my mouse, which isn't a fancy one, it's a Logitech G502 Hero. It's got a button I can hold and it reduces the sensitivity massively. So I can just hold this thumb button. So say if I'm sniping or something and I don't want the cursor going all over the place, which I use to move quickly, I just want to aim, then I can hold that button and it'll slow down my mouse massively. And it's like, stuff like that is a pretty big advantage. And it's not cheating, it's just, a feature of a mouse, so you can change the sensitivity at will. There's a lot of things like that. Alpha said, I don't understand why this mouse and keyboard versus that aim assist thing still going. Mouse keyboard has an advantage at range and controller has the advantage up close. Yep. That's just how it always felt like. Marked at home, Rainbow Six Siege just put an anti-mouse and keyboard system into the console ports. Yeah, I heard something about that. Like I said, I think the big problem with Rainbow Six Siege is that I don't think there's aim assist on controller. So if you then have a load of people on controller against someone on mouse and keyboard, the mouse keyboard's just going to be better. Like, just going to be much better. Mouse keyboard on older consoles lets you use mouse and keyboard and gave you aim assist. That was just straight up cheating. Oh yeah, I think that maybe that's crazy if stuff like that happens. If you've got the advantages of controller plus the advantages of mouse and keyboard, that's maybe a bit much. Maybe a bit much. Texas said, the only time I notice aim assist as a controller player is when it does something I don't want it to. Yep, exactly. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, that happens all the time to me. That definitely happens. House UK says, mouse and keyboard on sofa with a lap board, but I use controller where it suits all wheel or HOTAS. Big advantage of PC has always been choice. I mean, not anymore, obviously. It used to be, but I mean, now you can use all of those things on console. Like, you can get HOTAS sticks for console, you can use wheels on console, you can use mouse and keyboard if you want, or controller. It's kind of, you can use whatever you want now, which is wonderful. We know how aim assist works. I have no idea how you prove the advantage it yields. Trying to aim precisely with two enemies next to each other is a nightmare. Mouse and keyboard players who can snap to multiple targets, it looks amazing, and I don't think controller can do that. Yeah, for sure. It's just like, I think like I said, all of this argument, it's easy to get bogged down into the argument of specifics about aim assist and mouse and keyboard. when the reality is not that the people are upset that controller is better in some situations. They just want a reason to say why they're not doing so well. It's just a way of saving face. We've talked about it before. People constantly want to save face. People constantly want to be able to be like, I'm not worse than them. They beat me, but I'm not worse than them because X, Y, and Z. And as many reasons I have, I almost think a game would succeed more if every time you died, it came up with a little reason on the screen saying why you died and it wasn't your fault. It was like, oh, they found more ammo than you, so don't worry about it. Or like, oh, like there was some RNG and the bullet spread and they just got a lucky headshot, so don't worry about it. Or like, oh yeah, they outnumbered you. Actually, their teammates were looking, so you didn't stand a chance. If a game just did that every time you died, just a little comment to give you something to say to your team, to give you something to say to yourself, explaining why it wasn't your fault. I feel like that game would do really well. People would love it. Like people would be all over it. I know, obviously they wouldn't really. They'd be like, no, actually, I'm a big strong man. I can actually explain this myself. Anyway, so it's another fun angry rant. Anyway, we're gonna stop there. I'm gonna go get the end of my tongue chopped off. So that'll be fun. I'll give you fun updates on Twitter. So make sure you follow me there if you want that. Like I said, I probably won't be streaming later today. I'll just be feeling sorry for myself and playing Zelda. And then I'll watch the Sony conference later and maybe do some tweeting and stuff. Hopefully I'll be back for the podcast tomorrow morning if, I can talk and stuff, if I don't have like a swollen tongue or something stupid. If not, I will see you on Friday. So thank you very much for watching and goodbye.